Chapter 85. Outside the Scripture Pavilion. Su Qin was constantly sensing the essence-gathering Holy Land array. However, if I want to arrange this array, I need 999 jade stones. Su Qin frowned slightly. No matter what kind of heaven and earth array it is, it needs a medium to arrange it, and the essence-gathering Holy Land is no exception. 999 jade stones. Su Qin thought for a while and prepared to let Abbot Huiwen gather these materials. The Shaolin Temple, as a great sect, has thousands of disciples. It is absolutely easy to find the 999 jade stones that Su Qin needs. Time passed slowly. Su Qin's task immediately attracted the attention of Abbot Huiwen and the court heads. This is the first time Su Qin has ordered them to do something, so how can Abbot Huiwen and the others dare to slack off? On this day, Xian Ku finally returned to the Shaolin Temple. Xian Ku's return naturally caused some shock in the Shaolin Temple, including Abbot Huiwen. After the court heads met Xian Ku, they asked him to come to the Back Mountain Forbidden Area to see Su Qin. In the Back Mountain Forbidden Area. Greetings, Venerable. Xian Ku respectfully said to Su Qin. This time, if it were not for the wooden sword given by the Venerable, Xian Ku would have died in the hands of the Grade 1 Great Grandmaster. It can be said that Su Qin not only taught Xian Ku the Tao, but also saved his life. Do you have any doubts? Su Qin just glanced at Xian Ku and said, maybe Abbot Huiwen and the court heads can't see anything, but Su Qin's divine sense can observe the details. Even if it is not as good as the Buddhist divine sense, it is not something that Xian Ku can hide. Venerable, Xian Ku hesitated for a while, then bowed his head and said, disciple does have doubts. During this time, Xian Ku has seen all kinds of things in the world, and while he was deeply enlightened, the doubts in his heart also became stronger. Tell me about it. Su Qin looked at Xian Ku again and said slowly. Xian Ku took a deep breath, paused, and continued, Venerable One, when I entered the world this time, I realized that all living beings are doing it for profit. There are even some who would do anything to achieve their goals, and even commit atrocities. Disciple doesn't know whether this kind of behavior is right or wrong. If it is wrong, why no one can change it? Xian Ku raised his head and looked at Su Qin, his tone full of doubt. Right or wrong? A smile appeared on Su Qin's face, and he said, all kinds of things in the mortal world are mysteries. It is the law of the world. There is no right or wrong, just like wolves eating sheep and sheep eating grass. You are not involved, you are not a wolf, and you are not a sheep. The reason why you insist on right or wrong is only because of your mind. Su Qin's words were like a bronze bell. Every word shook Xian Ku. It was like a blow to the head, pulling him out of his doubts. There is no right or wrong. It is just a mind, Xian Ku. His eyes became brighter and brighter, as if he had seen through something, and his whole body suddenly became transparent. Thank you, Venerable One, for pointing this disciple out. Xian Ku once again bowed deeply to Su Qin and said respectfully, you may leave. Su Qin waved his hand and said, yes. Xian Ku bowed and left. Sigh, at such a young age, why do you have to think about philosophy? Su Qin shook his head. If it was an ordinary person, even those eminent monks, a holy monk, they may be stumped by Xian Ku. Even if they are not, it is impossible to give Xian Ku a clear answer. But who is Su Qin? He has lived 2 lives, and all kinds of ideas about his previous life are deeply engraved in his mind. How can he be stumped by Xian Ku? However, after this, there is no more karma in his heart, and he is expected to enter the Grade 1 Great Grandmaster realm before the age of 40. Su Qin thought and judged in his heart. A 40-year-old Grade 1 Great Grandmaster, although far from being comparable to Su Qin, but looking at the whole world, he is still a top genius. In the future, if he has enough opportunities, he can even touch the bottleneck of Arhat. Of course, even if everything goes well, it will take 100 or 200 years for Xian Ku to get close to the bottleneck of Arhat. And with Su Qin's current cultivation speed, in 100 or 200 years, even if he does not completely transcend the Arhat level, he will at least reach the invincible 9th heavenly layer of Arhat realm. I hope you can grow as much as possible before the scripture pavilion and the Bodhi court are exhausted. Su Qin thought silently. Little sister should be doing well in Chang and right? Su Qin raised his head slightly, looking in the direction of Chang and city, and suddenly thought. Since entering the Arhat realm, Su Qin quietly returned to Zhangzhou's Yan city once. However, when Su Qin arrived there, he learned that his family Su had moved to Chang. After Su Qin learned about this, he did not worry too much about the safety of his family Su. Cheng and city is under the control of the Emperor of Tang. With Prince Li Sheng, how could his family Su be in trouble? Besides, Li Sheng has now been conferred the title of Crown Prince by the Emperor of Tang. As long as the Emperor of Tang is alive, his family Su will be safe. In addition, his little sister is wearing the jade pendant Su Qin gave her, which contains a strand of Su Qin's divine sense. Through this strand of divine sense, even if Su Qin can't know what she has experienced, he can roughly judge his little sister's state. Divine sense is different from sword intent and saber intent. Whether it's sword intent or saber intent, they are but a strand of Su Qin's power, but divine sense is a strand of essence that Su Qin has separated from himself. To put it simply, if the sword intent in the wooden sword Su Qin gave to Xian Ku were to erupt, Su Qin could only be sure that the sword intent had erupted. However, Su Qin did not know why the sword intent had erupted, or what kind of enemy Xian Ku was facing. But divine sense is different. If the divine sense in Su Yueyun's jade pendant were to erupt, even if Su Qin is far away, he can roughly sense the situation on Su Yueyun's side. Over the years, through his connection with the jade pendant, Su Qin is very sure that Su Yueyun is very safe, both physically and mentally. I still have to cultivate. Outside the continent, in the depths of the endless ocean, there are still unknown martial arts legends. Even though my current strength has reached the third heaven, and I can dominate this continent, I am still not invincible in the entire world. There are still experts of the same level. Su Qin calmed down, swallowed a glazed golden elixir, slowly closed his eyes, and immersed himself in cultivation. At the same time, in Chang'an City, in a luxurious palace, song and dance celebrated the peace and harmony, and the guqin played. At the head of the palace sat a man in a brocade robe. At this moment, the man looked gloomy, obviously suppressing some kind of anger. A moment later, what does father mean? He actually made that bastard the crown prince? The luxurious man slammed his hand on the table, his anger soaring to the heavens. Chapter 86. As soon as the brocade-robed man finished speaking, all the singers who were performing and dancing knelt on the ground in fear, not daring to raise their heads. Prince Chen, be careful with your words. A middle-aged man who looked like a strategist hurried over and whispered. His Majesty personally issued an imperial edict to confer the title of Crown Prince, and then he sent eunuch Zhao to bring Prince Sheng to the East Palace. His Majesty is determined. The strategist quickly said, if Prince Chen's words reach His Majesty's ears and eunuch Zhao's ears, as soon as he said this, the brocade-robed man's face changed. He looked at the singers who knelt on the ground and dared not raise their heads, and his expression gradually calmed down and said, men, drag them away. Suddenly, dozens of soldiers in black armor walked out from the dark and dragged the terrified singers away. Then what should I do now? Watch that bastard sit on the throne? Prince Chen clenched his fists, his face full of unwillingness. Over the years, as the Emperor of Tang grew older and older, the conflict between him and the other princes grew bigger and bigger. But even so, Prince Chen was still willing to accept it, because he knew that he had hoped to sit on the throne. But now, with the Emperor of Tang's conferment, the Crown Prince had a master. How laughable was the competition between the princes? If it was another prince who was conferred the title of Crown Prince, even if Prince Chen was unwilling, he would not be filled with resentment like now. But Li Sheng, in Prince Chen's view, Li Sheng was just a bastard who jumped out from a corner. It was already a great blessing to enjoy the treatment of an imperial heir, and now he dared to touch the throne? Prince Chen, don't panic. The middle-aged man who looked like a strategist looked around and said in a low voice, "It's still too early to talk about the throne." "Oh?" Prince Chen's eyes lit up, and he stared at the strategist. "What do you think?" "Prince Chen, His Majesty is old. Even with eunuch Xiao's protection, there are many things that cannot happen according to his wishes." The middle-aged man who looked like a strategist said meaningfully. Hearing this, Royal Highness Chen narrowed his eyes. "You're right." Royal Highness Chen looked at his advisor with a smile on his face. "Father, he's old." Shaolin Temple. Back Mountain Forbidden Area. Su Qin sat cross-legged and looked at the thousands of top-grade jade stones in front of him. These top-grade jade stones were sparkling and translucent, priceless. If they were placed in the outside world, it would cause a commotion. However, at this moment, these jades were placed in front of Su Qin like stones. The Shaolin Temple is really efficient. Su Qin was quite satisfied. Yesterday, he had instructed Abbot Huiwen to collect jades. Today, these jades had appeared here, and the quantity was much more than the 999 jades. Since the jades are all here, let's start setting up the heaven and earth formation. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated, and everything about the essence-gathering Holy Land formation slowly flowed into his mind. Although Su Qin was very familiar with the essence-gathering Holy Land formation after the system's infusion, familiarity was familiarity. However, it was his first time setting up a formation, so he still had to be cautious. If something went wrong in the process, these jade stones would be wasted. Time passed. Su Qin embedded each jade stone in a special position in the back mountain forbidden area, and finally used his divine sense to pry the heaven and earth essence chi in a radius of tens of miles. This was the key to the heaven and earth formation. Whether it was the jades or other mediums, they were all just supplementary materials. The true determinant of whether the formation could be formed was whether the person setting up the formation had sufficient divine sense. Generally speaking, only Venerable Arhat or martial arts legend-level divine sense could pry the heaven and earth essence chi. Wang. As Su Qin's divine sense continued to guide, the jades embedded in the back mountain forbidden area bloomed with a misty light. Then, endless heaven and earth essence chi rushed in from all directions. Suddenly, 999 jades bloomed with a misty light again, constantly guiding the heaven and earth essence chi in a radius of tens of miles. Whoosh! Almost at a speed visible to the naked eye, the heaven and earth essence chi in the entire back mountain forbidden area condensed into a mist, constantly circling the back mountain and slowly spreading in all directions. At this moment, all the Shaolin Temple disciples opened their eyes wide and looked at the back mountain forbidden area subconsciously. "Look, there seems to be a mist in the back mountain," a Shaolin Temple disciple exclaimed and said loudly. Over the years, although there had been strange noises in the back mountain forbidden area, most of them were the gathering of heaven and earth essence chi and would soon disappear. But now, there was a mist that lingered for a long time, like a fairyland. This was the first time they had seen it. What happened? Why is there a mist in the back mountain? A disciple subconsciously approached the back mountain forbidden area and asked curiously. "Wait, is there something wrong with this mist?" A Shaolin Temple disciple subconsciously took a breath of the faint mist, and his face changed slightly. The mist he inhaled was only a trace of the infinitely diluted mist that floated out of the back mountain forbidden area. But even so, this Shaolin Temple disciple felt an icy cold aura permeating his body, which was very comfortable. "I feel it too. This mist is good stuff. I feel that the injuries I suffered from cultivation are getting better. Could it be that this fog is really immortal chi?" Many Shaolin Temple disciples were in disbelief and were discussing. At this moment, compared to the disciples' disbelief, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were even more shocked to the extreme. "This mist, is it condensed from heaven and earth essence chi?" The warrior monastery head was stunned and said with a trembling voice. They were at least martial artists in the upper realm. After experiencing the cleansing of heaven and earth essence chi, they naturally knew the benefits of heaven and earth essence chi to martial artists. The other court heads glanced at each other, and their faces were also full of shock. Why don't we go see the Venerable and ask what's going on? After a while, the disciplinary court head couldn't help but say. At this moment, the movement of the mist in the back mountain was too big. Even if they knew that Su Qin didn't want to be disturbed, they had to bite the bullet and go up. Back mountain forbidden area. Su Qin sat cross-legged. If the essence qi outside the back mountain was only condensed into mist, then here, the mist was about to form a substance. In such an environment, Su Qin only felt that the true essence in his body was running a lot faster. No wonder many venerable arhat and legends like to comprehend these heaven and earth great arrays. It turns out that there are such great benefits. Su Qin only felt that every piece of flesh in his body was cheering. Suddenly, at this moment, Su Qin's eyes moved and looked outside the back mountain forbidden area. They're here too. Su Qin's divine sense shrouded the area and naturally found Abbot Huiwen and the court heads standing outside the back mountain forbidden area hesitantly, not knowing whether to come in or not. Come in. Just as Abbot Huiwen and the court heads looked at each other and stopped outside the back mountain forbidden area, a calm voice sounded in their ears. The Venerable has agreed to let us in. The warrior monastery's court head looked happy and carefully walked into the back mountain forbidden area. Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads followed closely behind. And as they continued to walk in, Abbot Huiwen and the others increasingly felt the extremely rich essence qi of heaven and earth. Finally, they walked into the depths of Buddha Mountain in the back mountain forbidden area and saw Su Qin sitting cross-legged, surrounded by white mist. As he breathed, it was long and profound, almost like a Buddha. Greetings, Venerable One. Abbot Huiwen and the others bowed. Chapter 87. Get up. With Su Qin's words, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads dared to straighten their backs a little, but even so, they still lowered their heads and did not dare to look directly at Su Qin. Venerable, I wonder about the mist in this back mountain. Abbot Huiwen carefully organized his words and asked tentatively. In Abbot Huiwen's heart, the young monk sitting cross-legged in front of him was no longer a disciple of the Shaolin Temple, but the venerable Arhat, the reincarnation of Buddha, destined to break the limits of the world in the future. Mist? It's just a little thing I made. Su Qin didn't care. The mist, in Abbot Huiwen's eyes, was just a vision produced by the condensation of world's essence qi. It was not the same as the real mist at all. Little thing. The court heads looked at each other and felt as if they were dreaming. They had just quietly inhaled the mist outside the back mountain, so they could clearly perceive that the mist helped them. Especially the court head of Arhat, he spent most of his energy on external cultivation when he was young, which led to some internal injuries in his body. These internal injuries accumulated. Maybe nothing would happen now, but when the court head of Arhat's qi and blood really declined, it would really break out. The court head of Arhat also had a headache about this, but there was nothing he could do. These internal injuries were deep in the bone marrow. Unless he stepped into grade 1 and completed the transformation of his body, it would be difficult to get rid of them. But now, after inhaling a few breaths of the mist, the court head of Arhat felt that these internal injuries in his body were slowly getting better. Although there was still a long way to go before he fully recovered, at least it would not continue to deteriorate. However, for him, the mist was comparable to an elixir, but in Su Qin's mouth, it was just a little thing not worth mentioning. This made the court heads feel very emotional, and for a while, they didn't know what to say. They were all martial artists in the upper realm, and they were exposed to world's essence qi every day. Of course, they recognized that the mist was condensed from world's essence qi. However, even though he recognized it when he actually saw it and even absorbed it into his body, he still felt incredulous. Since you're here, I have something to say. Su Qin glanced at Abbot Huiwen and the court heads and said lightly, every day, some of the fog will spread to the outside of the back mountain. You can choose some disciples to absorb it. Once the heaven and earth elemental formation of the elemental gathering Holy Land was set up, it would attract the heaven and earth elemental qi within a radius of tens of miles at all times. The qi of heaven and earth was compressed by the heaven-earth formation and became solid. But there was still a small part of it that leaked out of the formation. That was the fog that the disciples of the Shaolin Temple saw. Compared to the true yuan qi of heaven and earth gathered by the essence-gathering Pure Land, the mist was far inferior. It was on a completely different level. But for the Shaolin Temple's middle realm disciples and even the upper realm court heads, it had a great effect. Nourishing the body, improving cultivation, and so on. Su Qin reminded Abbot Huiwen and the others of this matter based on the principle of not wasting anything. Anyway, Su Qin didn't care about the mist. Even if he didn't say it, the mist would naturally dissipate into heaven and earth. Instead of that, it was better to help the disciples of the Shaolin Temple. However, what Su Qin didn't expect was what kind of monstrous waves his words set off in the hearts of Abbot Huiwen and the court heads. One must know that the mist was not like some pills that would disappear after eating it. According to their guess, the mist should be able to be produced continuously. After absorbing it today, it will still appear tomorrow. What does this mean? This means that this is an inexhaustible treasure. Thank you, Venerable. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads bowed deeply to Su Qin. At this moment, there was nothing but gratitude in their hearts. Go out. Su Qin opened his mouth and said, now that the elemental gathering Holy Land formation had just been completed, before he had the time to settle down and experience it, Abbot Huiwen and the others came to find him. Now that he had explained everything, Su Qin naturally asked them to leave. Yes. Abbot Huiwen and the others respectfully left. What a pity! This kind of formation that gathers the qi of heaven and earth involves the operation of the qi of heaven and earth. Every once in a while, I have to personally maintain it. Otherwise, after 20 years at most, the effectiveness of the formation will continue to decline. After 100 years, it will completely become a useless formation. Su Qin thought silently in his heart. The heaven and earth formation that gathers the qi of heaven and earth was not the same as the heaven and earth formation that conceals or suppresses. The latter only needs to cover a very small area. In this small area, the fluctuations of heaven and earth are small and do not need to be constantly adjusted, so it can exist for a long time. Especially the concealment-type heaven and earth formation, which can be maintained for almost 1,000 years. For example, the secret chamber where Tu Arahen passed away was not discovered by Su Qin until 900 years later, and the formation can still avoid the detection of Su Qin's divine thought after 900 years. But the elemental gathering Holy Land formation is different. It involves the qi of heaven and earth within a radius of dozens of miles. Such a large area of qi of heaven and earth will change almost immediately. And once the qi of heaven and earth changes, the elemental gathering Holy Land formation will naturally change accordingly, otherwise it will gradually lose its effectiveness. While thinking, Su Qin closed his eyes and immersed himself in cultivation. At this moment, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads walked out of the back mountain forbidden area. Abbot Huiwen stopped and looked back at the slowly spreading fog. Even if this fog can only last for 50 years, it can ensure the prosperity of the Shaolin Temple for 300 years. Abbot Huiwen sighed and said softly, 50 years? 300 years of prosperity? The other court heads were shocked and looked at Abbot Huiwen in disbelief. They had overestimated the influence of the fog on the Shaolin Temple, but from Abbot Huiwen's words, it seems that the importance of the fog is far beyond their imagination. You don't believe me? Abbot Huiwen glanced at the court heads, shook his head and continued, I have just estimated that if we cultivate under this fog, in 10 years, the number of martial artists in the upper realm will double, and in 20 years, at least 2 Grade 1 Great Grandmasters will be born. In 50 years, the number of Great Grandmasters in our temple will reach 8 to 10. With so many Great Grandmasters, the number of powerhouses born in our temple will only increase. If this continues, I am afraid that 300 years of prosperity will not be enough. Abbot Huiwen said slowly. The other court heads were already dumbfounded by what they heard, especially when they heard that in 50 years, the number of Grade 1 Great Grandmasters in the Shaolin Temple will reach 8 to 10. This is a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster. In today's world, I am afraid that only the various countries have such a number of Great Grandmasters, right? To read the unmodified content, please go to Vinegar Studies. Chapter 88. When Abbot Huiwen talked about the influence of the fog in the back mountain, the court heads were shocked. They instinctively questioned Abbot Huiwen in their hearts, but on second thought, it seems that Abbot Huiwen's words are very reasonable. With the fog in the back mountain 50 years later, as long as there are no major changes, the Shaolin Temple is very likely to produce 8 to 10 Grade 1 Great Grandmasters. Hurry back and arrange for the disciples to absorb the fog. Otherwise, today's fog may dissipate. The Dharma court head glanced at the court heads who were still in shock and said, when these words came out, the court heads woke up from their daze. Not only do the disciples need to absorb the fog, but they also need the fog to nourish themselves. Especially the court heads of the Arhat court and the warrior monastery, who were originally at peak grade 3, and now with the help of the fog, they can step into grade 2 in one go. Thinking of this, everyone became excited. Back mountain forbidden area. Half a day later, Su Qin sat cross-legged, and the endless yuan qi mist poured into his body like a dragon. Hula, hula. Every time Su Qin breathed, it was like a certain mythical beast was breathing. The endless yuan qi mist faintly formed a vortex and was absorbed by him. The effect is good. At this time, Su Qin slowly opened his eyes, looking satisfied. At this moment, the world's essence qi around him is almost 100 times more than the world's essence qi in other places. Su Qin can greatly improve his cultivation speed here. Coupled with the endless supply of glazed golden cores, to some extent, Su Qin's strength is improving every moment. However, it is more difficult than I thought to break through from the 3rd heavenly layer to the 4th heavenly layer. Su Qin frowned slightly. Even in this cultivation environment, Su Qin still couldn't see where the peak of the 3rd heavenly layer was, as if there was no upper limit to this realm. I'm still too weak. If I were Arhat of the 9th heaven, I would be able to cover an area of 1,000 miles or even 10,000 miles with my enormous divine sense. Then, the elemental energy of the world within a radius of 5,000 kilometers will be gathered here. That will most likely truly be comparable to an immortal's abode. Su Qin sighed. The essence-gathering Holy Land formation was also divided into different levels. As for the lowest level ones, they could cover an area of several miles. Next, it would cover a radius of tens of miles, then hundreds of miles, thousands of miles, and tens of thousands of miles. If a venerable who had just entered the realm of Arhat came here, he would only be able to gather the natural energies within a radius of a few miles. However, at this moment, Su Qin had already reached the 3rd layer of the heavenly layer, and his spiritual sense was far superior to that of Arhat, who was at the 1st layer of the heavenly layer. Therefore, the essence-gathering Holy Land that he set up naturally reached the 2nd level, covering an area of dozens of miles. It's a pity that the essence-gathering Holy Lands can't be stacked on top of each other. Otherwise, I would like to set up a few more. Su Qin shook his head. But it can be done now. At least, my cultivation speed is definitely much faster than that of the previous Venerable Arhat of the Shaolin Temple. In fact, since ancient times, I'm afraid that no martial arts legend has ever had the same conditions as me. Su Qin nodded slightly. He wasn't dissatisfied. It should be known that throughout history, perhaps some martial arts legends had obtained a large formation similar to the pure land of essence gathering that could gather the qi of heaven and earth. However, it was unlikely that any of them would be willing to continuously consume a precious elixir like the glazed golden pill. Not to mention that Su Qin also had the Sutra of the Past Amitabha, a supreme scripture that could almost endlessly refine the natural energies. Let's cultivate, don't bite off more than you can chew. Su Qin closed his eyes again and circulated the Sutra of the Past Amitabha in his body. Late at night, the full moon hung high in the sky. Su Qin stopped cultivating. Time to sign in. Su Qin walked out of the back mountain and came to the Sutra Pavilion. System, sign in. Su Qin said in his heart. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. You have received the Pearl Demon Subduing Supreme Divine Art. Prompt, the Taoist connotation here is about to run out, and it will become a non-repeatable sign in place. 2 consecutive cold, mechanical sounds sounded in Su Qin's ears. Pearl demon subduing supreme divine art? A non-repeatable sign in place? Su Qin raised his head and looked at the scripture pavilion, his thoughts inexplicably complicated. Since Su Qin entered the Shaolin Temple for nearly 30 years, he had signed in front of the Sutra Pavilion countless times. But now, the Sutra Pavilion that had accompanied Su Qin for many years was finally exhausted by Su Qin. The Taoist connotation was exhausted, and he could no longer sign in. Although the exhaustion of the Taoist connotation of the demon-subduing tower had already reminded Su Qin that even an ancient temple like the Shaolin Temple that had been passed down for thousands of years didn't have endless Taoist connotation. But when this day really came, Su Qin was still filled with emotions. The Taoist connotation of the Sutra Pavilion is gone, and the Bodhi Court is probably going to be gone soon. Su Qin thought silently in his heart. Although the Bodhi Court was an important place of the Shaolin Temple, in terms of Taoist connotation, it shouldn't have much more than the Sutra Pavilion. In addition, Su Qin wouldn't sign in the Sutra Pavilion in the future. All the sign-in opportunities would probably be used in the Bodhi Court. No matter how much Taoist connotation there was in the Bodhi Court, it couldn't withstand Su Qin coming once a day. When I can't sign in the Bodhi Court anymore, it's time to go out. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. Although he had stayed in the Shaolin Temple for almost 30 years, he didn't feel any burden about leaving. The main reason was that Su Qin thought that he had left enough for the Shaolin Temple. Not only did he help Xianku complete the Buddha's heart, but he also often gave him pointers, saving him from many detours. It was equivalent to cultivating a future grade 1 great perfection for the Shaolin Temple. In addition, Su Qin also left the essence-gathering Holy Land array in the back mountain forbidden area. This kind of array that gathers world's essence qi, even without Su Qin's maintenance, can last for 20 years. After 20 years, it will decline, and it won't be completely destroyed until 100 years later. This doesn't include Su Qin's many times secretly helping the Shaolin Temple solve countless life and death crises. The grievances have been settled. The karma has been settled. Just as Su Qin was thinking, bits and pieces of information about the Pearl Demon subduing supreme divine art poured into Su Qin's mind. After a while, Su Qin opened his eyes. Not bad. Su Qin nodded slightly. The Pearl Demon subduing supreme divine art is a pure, offensive divine art. It can condense 24 pearls with one's own true essence to suppress all demons and monsters. More than 1,000 years ago, a certain Shaolin Venerable Arhat once used this divine art to kill a certain demon path legend. Although it is said that a legend is often not seen in several eras, whether it is a legend or Venerable Arhat, they both have a shoyuan of 500 years, which is far longer than an era. Therefore, if one is lucky enough, one can often see several legends coexisting in the same era. Of course, if one is unlucky, it may be impossible for a legend to be born in several eras. Condense. Su Qin raised his right hand and condensed a pearl according to the operation method of the Pearl Demon subduing supreme divine art. This pearl spun in a circle, faintly revealing a palpitating aura. It's time to go back. Su Qin carefully sensed it and was quite satisfied. In terms of power, this divine art is probably in the top 200 divine arts that Su Qin has obtained in so many years. It is rare. To read the unmodified content, please go to Vinegar Love Literature Learning. Chapter 89. Su Qin returned to the back mountain forbidden area. Although the descending demon pearl supreme divine art is a good divine art, Su Qin did not spend much effort on it. After all, Su Qin knows that no matter what divine art it is, it depends on one's own cultivation. Time passed slowly. Su Qin once again returned to his peaceful days. Sign in cultivation, heaven and earth, and occasionally giving pointers to Xianku. Of course, Su Qin only gave a little pointers to Xianku, and did not choose the path for Xianku to walk in the future. In martial Dao cultivation, especially when one reaches the grade 1 Great Grandmaster realm, those who are similar will live and those who are similar will die. Every grade 1 great grandmaster can only achieve their own transformation and become a peak grade 1 if they walk their own path. Xian Ku has a Buddha's heart and is born intelligent. Even a grade 1 great perfection martial artist cannot affect him. But Su Qin is different. As a venerable arhat at the 3rd heavenly layer, his every move will have an indelible impact on Xian Ku. Perhaps these influences are good for Xian Ku, but they may also be bad. Therefore, Su Qin simply let it go, and only give a few pointers when Xian Ku has doubts. Everything else is left to develop. Just when Su Qin was immersed in cultivation again, many disciples of the Shaolin Temple have also undergone significant changes. The back mountain is filled with fog, and every disciple who has been in the temple for more than 10 years can cultivate near the back mountain. Under the fog, even the martial artists in the middle realm and lower realm who have not been exposed to the world's essence qi can feel their body being nourished and gradually becoming stronger. On this day, patrolling monk Zhenji had just returned from cultivation near the back mountain when he saw several other disciples whispering about something. "What are you talking about?" Zhenji walked over and asked casually. At this moment, Zhenji was still amazed by the effect of the fog in the back mountain. As a disciple of the Zhen generation, Zhenji had been in the temple for decades. Naturally, he was qualified to practice in the forbidden area of the back mountain. At first, Zhenji didn't think much of it. He thought that the fog was useless. But with this period of cultivation, Zhenji could clearly feel the changes in his body. Zhenji could even faintly feel that his body's blood vitality had become vigorous once more. How unbelievable was this? One had to know that a martial artist's vitality would gradually increase from birth until it reached a peak and then fell back down. Perhaps it was because he practiced martial arts that his peak was extended for a period of time. However, if there were no other major breakthroughs, the decline of a martial artist's qi and blood would be irreversible after a period of peak. Originally, Zhenji was in such a situation. His qi and blood had already begun to decline. If there were no accidents, his strength would not improve at all in the future, and his achievements in this life would stop here. But now, Zhenji actually felt that his qi and blood were slightly flourishing. That mist. In Zhenji's mind, the fog that covered the sky and covered the earth appeared again. While Zhenji was deep in thought, the disciples who were whispering to each other quickly looked up at Zhenji and said, "Brother Zhenji, Brother Zhenji, we are talking about the venerable in the back mountain." A disciple looked around, lowered his voice, and said in a respectful tone, "The venerable?" Zhenji frowned and looked at the disciples. "Is the venerable someone you can talk about?" "Brother Zhenji, we definitely don't mean to disrespect the venerable. We are just curious about what kind of person the venerable is." The disciple who spoke at the beginning quickly replied, for fear that Zhenji would think that he disrespected the venerable. "I don't think you dare." Zhenji glanced at the disciples and shook his head. "You don't have to think about what kind of person the venerable is. Just remember that the height of the venerable is no longer something that mortals like us can understand." At the same time, on Wudong Mountain, many Wudong Mountain disciples were gathered in front of an ancient hall. Many disciples had already gone down the mountain to travel the world, and some were even thousands of miles away from Wudong Mountain. But at this moment, these disciples were all standing here as if waiting for something. "Is Master coming out of seclusion?" A Wudong Mountain disciple's voice trembled as he looked at the ancient hall in the distance and whispered. "That's what Martial Uncle said." Zhang Shao also stood next to him and replied in a low voice. "Why did Master come out of seclusion?" The second Wudong Mountain disciple looked at Zhang Shao and asked solemnly. Daoist Zhang could suppress the world for decades without leaving Wudong Mountain. This disciple couldn't understand why Daoist Zhang would announce his exit at this time. Zhang Shao thought for a while and tentatively said, "Some time ago, I went down the mountain to travel the world, but I met an enemy of Wudong Mountain. This enemy was a grade 1 great grandmaster and wanted to kill me." Zhang Shao paused and continued, "Maybe Master knows about this and wants to come out of seclusion to avenge me?" "Impossible." The Wudong Mountain disciple who just spoke shook his head and said, "Master is in seclusion to break through the supreme Tao. Ordinary things can't disturb Master. If you die, Master may come out of seclusion to avenge you, but since you are not dead, there is still room for redemption. Master will at most order us to go down the mountain to find out the truth. It is impossible for him to come out personally." When these words came out, the other Wudong mountain disciples immediately nodded. Although Daoist Zhang is protective, nothing happened to Zhang Xiao. In this case, Daoist Zhang will definitely not come out of seclusion for this matter. While many Wudong mountain disciples were waiting, the door of the ancient hall was quietly pushed open. A man in a Daoist robe with simple facial features slowly walked out. His skin was like jade, his eyes were clear, and his age could not be seen. His movements were meticulous, as if he had a strange charm. As soon as the Daoist priest came out, many Wudong mountain disciples bowed and shouted, "Welcome back, Master. Welcome, Ancestor." Their voices shook the sky and spread for several miles. After a while, Daoist Zhang looked around and said, "Get up." This Daoist Zhang, who is known to suppress the world, did not have a trace of a martial artist's aura, as if he was an ordinary person. "Master, did you make a breakthrough?" A Wudong mountain disciple couldn't help but ask. When the other disciples heard this, their expressions changed and they stared at Daoist Zhang closely. If Daoist Zhang really took the step in the legend, then Wudong Mountain would continue to suppress the world for 300 years. Breakthrough? Daoist Zhang smiled and shook his head. "How difficult is the mythical road? Even if I cultivate in seclusion for another 100 years, I won't be able to break through." Then why did Master come out of seclusion this time? The disciple who spoke at the beginning asked carefully. "Go down the mountain." Daoist Zhang raised his head and looked in the direction of the Shaolin Temple. He said softly, "Seeking Dao." To read the unmodified content, please go to Vinegar Literature Learning. Chapter 90. Down the Mountain. Seeking the Dao. Daoist Zhang's tone was flat, but when he said the word, "seeking the Dao," there was a hint of expectation. Seeking the Dao? Many Wudong mountain disciples looked at each other, not knowing what he meant. In their eyes, Daoist Zhang is the Dao of the world. Why would they need to go down the mountain to seek the Dao? Only Zhang Xiao and the other disciples' expressions changed slightly, as if they thought of something. If there is a rumor that the Shaolin Temple has venerable arhat, in the eyes of most martial artists, it is doubtful, but after experiencing the scene of going down the mountain, Zhang Xiao and the other disciples knew that the Shaolin Temple does have venerable arhat. If it is not venerable arhat, who can kill a grade 1 great grandmaster from thousands of miles away with an ordinary wooden sword? This time, Daoist Zhang came out of seclusion because he heard the news. This time, if I don't return, Wudong Mountain will be closed for 20 years. Daoist Zhang looked into the distance, and under the gaze of many Wudong mountain disciples, he walked down the mountain step by step. Shaolin Temple. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were overjoyed. In just a few months, among the disciples cultivating near the back mountain, there were 3 who entered the upper realm. How rare is this? Even in a great sect like the Shaolin Temple, upper realm martial artists are enough to serve as court heads. If it was in the past, it would take at least 10 or 20 years for the Shaolin Temple to produce 3 upper realm martial artists. But now, it was completed in a few months. How can this not make Abbot Huiwen and the court heads happy? The more martial artists there are in the upper realm, the more likely it is for a grade 2 and grade 1 great grandmaster to appear. Once the number of grade 2 and grade 1 great grandmasters reaches a certain number, it can in turn guide a large number of disciples with potential. This cycle will form, and the Shaolin Temple will become stronger and stronger. Don't get carried away. These 3 upper realm disciples are the accumulation of our temple in the past years. They are all at peak grade 4 and are only 1 step away from the upper realm. Now, with the help of the fog, I was able to make a breakthrough. But it's impossible to give birth to an upper realm expert in such a short time. The head of the Dharma court said slowly. As soon as he said this, the other court heads who were immersed in joy immediately calmed down. Huiju is right. Abbot Huiwen nodded slightly. Although he was just as happy, he had also thought of this point. The reason why the Shaolin Temple was able to produce 3 upper realm experts in just a few months was mainly because of their previous accumulation. If he wanted to continue this smoothly, it would be as difficult as ascending the heavens. Abbot, I should be breaking through soon. At this moment, the warrior monastery's head couldn't help but ask, "You want to break through?" Abbot Huiwen looked at the head of the warrior monastery in surprise. One must know that the head of the warrior monastery is a grade 3 martial artist. If he breaks through, he will enter grade 2. Today, in addition to Su Qin, the Shaolin Temple only has 1 grade 1 martial artist, Abbot Huiwen, and 2 grade 2 martial artists, including the head of the Dharma court. Now, if there is 1 more grade 2 martial artist in the warrior monastery, the foundation of the Shaolin Temple will naturally increase greatly. Just when Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were rejoicing, a disciple of the Shaolin Temple hurried in. "Abbot, court head, someone is asking for an audience." The disciple of the Shaolin Temple panted. "Asking for an audience?" Abbot Huiwen frowned slightly. "Who is it?" He said he is from Wudong Mountain, surnamed Zhang. What? The court head's pupils shrank. Wudong Mountain? Surnamed Zhang? No matter how incredible it was, the court heads subconsciously thought of Daoist Zhang on Wudong Mountain. "Let's go out and have a look." Abbot Huiwen looked solemn and immediately got up and walked out of the Shaolin Temple. The other court heads looked at each other and immediately followed. So, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads arrived outside the Shaolin Temple. At this moment, a man wearing a Daoist robe with simple facial features was standing there quietly. Sure enough, it's Daoist Zhang. The court heads were shocked and still couldn't believe it. They didn't expect that Daoist Zhang of Wudong Mountain was standing outside the Shaolin Temple at this moment. Daoist Zhang. Abbot Huiwen took a breath, stepped forward and asked solemnly. Although he is a grade 1 great grandmaster, in front of Daoist Zhang, who has been a peak grade 1 for decades, he is still not enough. "Abbot." Daoist Zhang's eyes were calm and gentle, looking at Abbot Huiwen and slightly nodded. "I don't know why Daoist Zhang came to the Shaolin Temple." Abbot Huiwen didn't beat around the bush and asked bluntly. When Lao Dao was young, he wandered the Jianghu and was fortunate enough to observe half of the 9 Yang divine art of your temple. Daoist Zhang did not answer Abbot Huiwen's question. Instead, he answered his own question. This half of the 9 Yang divine art is of great help to Lao Dao. Speaking of this, Daoist Zhang stretched out his right hand and took out a book. "Lao Dao has nothing to repay you with, but this Tai Chi Heart Sutra." Tai Chi Heart Sutra, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were stunned. Tai Chi Heart Sutra is the work of Daoist Zhang. Even among the many disciples of Wudong Mountain, only a few have learned the Tai Chi Heart Sutra. But now, Daoist Zhang gave the Tai Chi Heart Sutra to the Shaolin Temple? Daoist Zhang, please take it back. Since the 9 Yang divine art has leaked to the Jianghu, it has nothing to do with the temple. Thinking quickly, Huiwen rejected the Tai Chi Heart Sutra without hesitation. Although the Tai Chi Heart Sutra is good, it walks the path of Taoism. Even if the Shaolin Temple got it, it would be useless. On the contrary, Daoist Zhang even gave the Tai Chi Heart Sutra. Obviously, he was after something big. Daoist Zhang shook his head slightly and did not take back the Tai Chi Heart Sutra. Other than that, speaking of this, Daoist Zhang's eyes suddenly lit up. "Lao Dao came here to seek an audience with the Venerable One of your temple." Seek an audience with the Venerable One, Abbot Huiwen's face changed. "Daoist Zhang, I'm afraid you're late. The Venerable One has already said that he won't see anyone." Abbot Huiwen was silent for a while and said slowly, "It's okay. Lao Dao can wait." Daoist Zhang was extremely carefree. Abbot Huiwen frowned. If Daoist Zhang, the master of Wudong, was still blocking the door, wouldn't it be a great loss of face for the Shaolin Temple? "Daoist Zhang, please go back." Abbot Huiwen sighed softly. "Since you know that the Venerable One is in charge of our temple, aren't you afraid that the Venerable One will attack you?" Abbot Huiwen's words were a warning. "Ask in the morning, and you can die in the evening." A smile appeared on Daoist Zhang's face. "As long as you let me see the Venerable One, Lao Dao's life is yours." Daoist Zhang's eyes were clear. and his face was serious. This, Abbot Huiwen looked at Daoist Zhang with a solemn expression. In that case, the Shaolin Temple can only ask for advice from Daoist Zhang's Tai Chi path. Abbot Huiwen slowly channeled his inner force and looked directly at Daoist Zhang. Daoist Zhang wanted to see the Venerable One, but with the Venerable One's status, who could see him just because they wanted to? If anyone could see the Venerable One, where would the Venerable One's face be? Where would the Shaolin Temple's face be? With the Venerable One's kindness to the Shaolin Temple, even if Abbot Huiwen knew that he was far from being a match for Daoist Zhang, he would still try his best to stop him. When the other court heads saw this scene, they also channeled their inner force secretly, ready to attack at any time. Just when Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were at daggers drawn, a sigh of relief came. A sorrowful sigh could be heard, sounding both benevolent and boundless. Heaven and earth were drawn out, and time passed quickly. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were shocked and subconsciously looked in the direction of the back mountain. Daoist Zhang did the same. He raised his head slightly and looked at the back mountain. However, when Daoist Zhang looked, he saw a scene that he would never forget for the rest of his life. The back mountain, which was originally calm and serene, suddenly became tall, filling up his entire field of vision. At the highest point of all vision, a figure sitting cross-legged appeared. This figure was like the Buddha in the center of the Pure Land, sacred, compassionate, solemn, and pure. Only, I was supreme. That is, Daoist Zhang's mind was shaken. He only felt that his vision began to blur, and his thoughts kept falling. To read the unmodified content, please go to Vinegar, Lu, Wen, Shui. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.